the year that I climbed Aconcagua in South America was, at least according to one research report, the deadliest year on Aconcagua in like a decade or since they started studying death rates on the mountains. Our first strategy is in the American car wash industry.
So, well, the David Goggins equivalent of the private equity industry, and we managed to find you and get you on the podcast, Andrews. Welcome back to the Raw Selection Private Equity Podcast. On the podcast today is Andrew Towne, a partner at a private equity firm, Olympus Pines, and also a 5-time world record holder. We're going to dive into the world of private equity and the arduous task of getting 5 world records. Let's dive in. Andrew, if you can share a brief insight into you, please.
Morning, Alex. My name's Andrew Towne. I grew up in North Dakota, which is a small, cold, rural state near the Canadian border. And I probably would still be there today if a high school German teacher hadn't encouraged me to apply for a scholarship to study abroad when I was 16, where I ended up living in Germany for 1 year. After that, I was fascinated by cultures and foreign relations. So I went off to Yale for university, where I studied international relations, and then ended up working for the government for a number of years in a foreign policy type role.
Interesting. So a teacher told you, a German teacher told you to go to Germany, in essence?
My sophomore year, so grade 10, German teacher suggested that I apply for a scholarship, and I took a weekend, applied for the scholarship, ended up winning it, and all of a sudden had a choice of staying in North Dakota for grade 11 or living abroad for a year. And I said, hey, free trip abroad for a year doesn't sound bad.
Makes sense. So what's one mistake that you see private equity firms or portfolio companies making, and what would you suggest to correct them?
Not focusing enough on operations and transformation, for sure. I think in modern private equity, it's a no-brainer to have a strong portfolio operations machine, because if you don't, at worst, I wonder how easily you can win bids today in competitive processes to acquire companies if you haven't baked into your investment thesis a certain amount of transformation value that you think you can unlock. And at best, even if you're able to get a deal where you think just slapping some debt on it is enough for you to hit your investment goals, having a strong portfolio operations team or an ability to actually roll up your sleeves and get into the business can unlock disproportionate value.
So I think anybody would say we need better portfolio operations, we need better support for that. What are some of the examples of either some of the work that you're doing with the portfolio, not specifics, but examples of, or how you're kind of structuring things to bring that value to portfolio companies, obviously from day one, I'm assuming?
Sure. I mean, there's so many levers that you can pull. You start on the revenue side. It's everything from making sure that your sales and marketing machine is strong to making sure that you have the right pricing strategy, making sure that the products that you're bringing to market have good product market fit and will continue to have a good market going into the future. On the cost side, it's all the traditional levers. It's everything from procurement and making sure that your supply chain, are you negotiating effectively? Like, I'm always surprised how easy it is to get another 10 or 20% discount just by asking a supplier for that discount and by negotiating a little bit more strongly with them. Or switching vendors, finding a different way to procure similar materials for your inputs in your industry. Other cost drivers, you've got all the traditional stuff on OpEx. How can you run more efficiently? How can you design tighter processes? How can you strengthen your organization so that every player on the team is a star quarterback? The list goes on. I mean, there's probably 20 different things that we would look at to strengthen revenue and cost in any acquisition.
And how are you structuring that internally? Is that a playbook that you kind of roll out? The old classic spreadsheet or something equivalent with all the kind of check boxes on there of, can we move these levers? Is this ROI positive for this particular business, obviously, versus in the investment it would take to change? Is that how you kind of structure things?
So we don't have a formal playbook yet, but a number of us have a similar background. Three of us came from Boston Consulting Group before coming to Olympus Pines, and so one of my business partners and then members of our team have sort of more of a traditional consulting background that makes a lot of it a little bit more intuitive.
Interesting. Let's see, Boston consulting background. What got you into consulting, and then what got you into private equity?
Sure. So I mentioned that I spent a year of high school studying in Germany, and in college, I had another similar experience where there was a scholarship that paid for me to spend a year at the University of Nairobi in Kenya studying Swahili. And then since college, I've had the opportunity to live for a number of months in Mexico, Kazakhstan, Europe, a number of other places. And all of this comes back to the original fascination with foreign cultures. So the question was, what got me into consulting and private equity? And it started with an interest in international relations and evolved into an interest in the interplay between international sovereign governments and the global economy. So I studied business at the Wharton School in order to learn about the economy and the way that it influences foreign policy and vice versa. And then I also studied law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School because I was interested in how, policy is fundamentally law. It's the words that set the rules for our society, at least in, the West. And so consulting was a natural opportunity to see and influence the way leaders of international corporations interact with governments and sort of basically exist and perform within the global economy. So that's why consulting. I loved consulting. I loved the diversity of the work. I loved meeting different teams and getting to know them and helping them thrive on relatively short timelines. Ultimately, what was missing for me was the opportunity to own the decisions for myself. It's easy for me to write on a piece of paper, the analysis suggests you should do X. It's another thing entirely to actually navigate the organizational complexity. Like, first you have to stomach the risk. You have to agree that, we're really going to do this. It could fail. But then also you have to overcome hurdles with other stakeholders who might not be there in terms of their willingness to take a big risk and make a big radical decision for their company or for their division or whatever. So the movement of private equity was essentially, I wanted to own more decisions, and I wanted to develop conviction to meet my threshold of what was right, what we needed to do, and then also execute it and bear the consequences of the decision and the follow through.
Commonly converted from a consulting background to actually get into the full exposure of things are quite common. I wonder, someone who's well-traveled, I'm not particularly well-traveled myself, which classic Yorkshireman never leaves Yorkshire, other than going to America to see clients and so forth. But from your kind of travels and world perspective in Kazakhstan, and I won't be testing you on your Swahili, I'm not very good at that myself, but coming from North Dakota to seeing obviously phenomenal parts of the world and areas that probably a lot of listeners haven't seen, what did you take from, or how did that change your perspective of things by seeing all these different cultures, all these different countries, and all this kind of travels away from North Dakota? We're not doing North Dakota a great advert here, but what did you learn from all of that?
More than anything, the universality of the human experience. We're all human. We are all much more similar than we are different. A smile is a smile in every language. A sunset attracts oohs and ahs from people in any place in the world. Love is love anywhere in the world. And it's just been with me, I guess, ever since I was young, ever since my first experience truly learning what it's like to walk a mile in the shoes of another culture. And so ever since then, my first question is not, why did this person behave badly toward me? My first question is, I wonder about this person's life and upbringing, and I wonder if their behavior was bad behavior to my context, or if their behavior was actually a very natural response based on their environment, where they come from, etc. That's been my biggest takeaway from living in multiple different countries.
It's interesting that suppose we go, and the natural inclination of that question was, what are the differences? And I love the fact that you just answered all about the similarities. And that could probably be an anti-racism campaign of smiles are smiles, sunsets are met with the same approach. And that's a little bit of I think interesting reflection.
Since college, I ended up spending over a decade volunteering for the organization Youth for Understanding, which sent me on exchange when I was 16. And to this day, I believe one of the most powerful experiences we could give to any young person is the opportunity to live with a foreign family in a foreign country for, call it, 3 months or more, long enough that they really start to get used to the foreign culture as opposed to feeling like a tourist. But not everybody is able to have an experience like that, a transformative experience like that. So nothing against people who don't think that way, but I sometimes giggle. I'll at the moment we're investing in car washes, and as part of our owner-operator mentality, my business partners and I are often leading operations on the front line. And so I was working at the drive-through window of one of our car washes a few months ago, and a parent in a minivan with 2 teenage kids, as they were driving away from the drive-through window, I overheard the parent say to the kids, "That's why you have to go to college," in reference to the guy with gray hair who was asking them if they wanted the top tier car wash. And I thought, gee, that's unfortunate, right? But people are people, and people sometimes feel better about themselves if they think that they're, maybe a step higher on the social hierarchy than somebody else. And whatever it is that motivates people to think like that or say things like that, you don't have to live with a foreign family for very long before you realize, like, hey, we're all the same. Like, I don't care what your educational background is. I don't care what your job is. I don't care what your housing situation is. But like, we all just want to fall in love and watch the sunset.
Fall in love and watch the sunset. Like it.
So anyway, it comes down to meeting everybody where they are, and always withholding judgment as much as possible to try to understand somebody's context before, saying that they acted inappropriately or did something wrong.
Interesting comment from the woman. Said with all the right intentions to inspire her children, but ironically didn't know there was a private equity investor stood at the window, which, for everyone listening, probably understands that private equity investors aren't known for their poverty and not being a lucrative environment, which is obviously a part attracting of this industry. To protect investors from bad hires for your portfolio company, I've collated into a brand new book some of the top tips and processes investors use to ensure they do not hire those bad hires into their portfolio companies. We are giving the book for free for the first 100 people that join the waiting list, so please check out the show notes and get your name down for a free copy. But car washes. So you mentioned car washes as an investment. Why car washes?
Yeah. So my business partners and I have looked at a lot of different industries. We're just getting started. The company is about 4 years old, plus or minus a few months. And our first strategy is in the American car wash industry. We like it a lot. The industry is undergoing a great amount of change, driven by advances in the technology, particularly point of sale, in equipment and buildings, that some car washes are capable of delivering a much higher quality car wash than people were accustomed to for the past few decades in America. And that combination makes it the modern car wash in America, at least built out very rapidly, have the potential to be very highly automated, while delivering a very good product to customers at an attractive price point because of the level of automation. Now, the car wash industry in America has been changing a lot for 6 years plus, since it's been changing a lot very quickly. We are starting to see the early signs that the industry transformation is approaching the point of maturity, in the sense that we're starting to see winners and losers in the space. So we're refining our operations and our value proposition to make sure that we stay on the winning edge of things. But generally, like, at least in the geographies in which we're buying and developing, we still see a ton of white space. So we're continuing to invest in car washes, and then who knows? Like, we like real estate, so we'll probably stay in real estate concepts, but I don't want to rule too much out too early for what's next.
So the world of car wash in the UK was all these four-pillar rollers, four-pillar buildings, rollers, everything else, which predominantly renowned for scratching the hell out of your car. That we've then moved into a world of mainly manual, if I'm going to be honest. So it's either self car washes or go down and there's 2 or 3 guys all soaking wet in hopefully a sunny day, but that doesn't happen too often in the UK, to then clean. Is that the level of investment, your type of investments you're investing in, or is this some super high technology, some fancy machine that cleans your car?
Yeah,
or both?
If you approached one of our car washes, you'd say, that's a car wash. So in that sense, we have brushes and knitters, which are the soft cloth. I mean, the secret to washing your car is still detergent, friction, and water, right? So what we're finding among American consumers is the no-touch car wash usually involves high-pressure water. You might see it next to a gas station where you'll have 1 or 2 robot arms that circle your car, blasting you with water. Some of those you can get a pretty good wash in. The issue a lot of our consumers tell us about is the processing speed, because you'll typically be able to do 1 car at a time, and it might take 5 to 8 minutes for 1 car, which means if there are 3 cars waiting for a car wash after a snowstorm, when there's salt on the roads, you might be talking about a 20 or 30 minute wait. So the reason guests tell us they like our car wash is we have a very high processing speed, which means even if you see 4 or 5, 6 cars in front of you, you know that you can be in or out in less than 5 minutes. And then in terms of automation, one of the advances is the type of car wash that we build and buy uses a technology for the mitters and the wraps, essentially the soft cloth, that reduces the amount of pebbles or gravel that they pick up from any car. And it's usually, if a car gets scratched, it's usually because the brushes picked up a dirt clod from the prior car and then whipped the dirt clod or a piece of the dirt clod against your car. And so by reducing the amount of dirt and gravel that you pick up in the brushes, you're reducing the incidence of anything happening to the car behind. Now, every once in a while, a guest will say that something happened to their car from our car wash, and we obviously see if it actually happened or if they're just bringing their problem to us and hoping that we'll solve it, and then we focus on customer service, and if something needs to be made right, we make it right. But the incidence rate is fairly low, which is part of what drives the profitability of the business model.
Is this classically a highly fragmented industry, single owner, sites, obviously franchise, I would guess.
Yeah, extremely fragmented, which is part of what attracts us to us today. For the last 5 or 6 years, there have been multiple billion-dollar private equity funds in America investing into the car wash space.
Oh, really?
There are, I think the largest car wash chain in America today is Mr. Car Wash. They're publicly traded on the stock exchange. I think they have 450 car washes across America. But compare that to the fast food quick serve industry where, I don't even know, McDonald's has 10 or 15,000 restaurants in America today. Taco Bell, KFC, Chick-fil-A, Panera. In the retail world, the idea that the largest single chain competitor only has 500 plus or minus units is bananas. And so you're seeing some competitors begin to scale to that point. But we look at some of the statements that our competitors are making about the reality is that the space, it's hard to develop a new car wash. They're not, they're a special use in many jurisdictions. City councils aren't necessarily looking forward to a new car wash as much as they might look forward to a new steakhouse. So it takes time. They're complicated constructions. You have to find and buy real estate, and the best corners aren't all available on the same day, even if you had the money to buy 1,000 sites today. And so for all those reasons, like that's part of what we think gives this opportunity a little bit of a tail is even the largest competitors aren't consolidating super quickly.
Makes sense. Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick mention of a long-standing partnership with Grata. As you will probably know, the private equity scene is constantly evolving, and deal flow is moving now to proprietary and data-driven processes. Grata provides you with the data and information of over 7 million private companies. So if you're looking to improve your proprietary deal flow and improve the data access, then reach out to Grata today. Now back to the podcast. So I usually finding really good bridge into my questions, Andrew, but this is going to be poor. From car washes to, reference obviously on the research from you. Tell us about your 5 world records holding. And I'd like to say the pain behind all of that rather than just the glory of 5 world records, because I haven't got any myself, but I'm assuming they're quite difficult to come by.
Sure. So, yeah, a little bit of a different story. I'll switch gears. In North Dakota, when I was young, I was quite overweight. At one point, I was 5 feet 3 inches tall. Not sure what that is in meters. And
we use metric system. We use that feet in inches in the UK. So we're weird over here. We use every mixture of everything.
So I was 5'3", 220 pounds when I was growing up.
Wow.
And my high school classmates and my middle school classmates, they had a nickname for me, which was Towne's Busted. My last name is Towne, and Towne's Busted was in reference to my heaving bust. So if I showed you, in America in those days, you would have a physical picture of a yearbook with everybody's pictures in it, and you'd pass it around, and all your friends would sign it at the end of the school year. And when I passed mine around for everybody to sign it, they all drew a bust on me and wrote "Towne's Busted" over my face. So that really irked me. And when I was 15, I went outside the house and I jogged half a block, maybe 50 meters. And then I walked 50 meters, and then I did it again. And within about 6 months, I remember the first time I was able to jog an entire mile without stopping.
Nice.
That felt like a massive accomplishment, and it got me wondering what it might feel like to be sort of a proper athlete. So in college at Yale, there were only 2 sports that competed at the highest level that allowed people to join without any prior experience. And those were rowing and fencing. And I figured if I went home to rural North Dakota as a varsity fencer, they'd probably just call me a swashbuckler or something like that. So really there was no choice. It was join the rowing team. And I'll never forget the pain of competing in athletics at that level with no athletic background was something I was totally unprepared for. And I used to be terrified before every race that in the clutch of the race, I might quit or break and slow down and give up, so to speak, and let my teammates down. But over the course of 4 years, with the help of my coach, I learned to trust myself, and I learned to realize my coach had a saying that I really loved. Ironically, it's worked for me because it's the moment of mental fatigue when you want to slow down that you instead say, can I give it 1% more? And no matter which choice you make, 30 seconds later, you find that your mind is in a different place and you're better able to sort of push through and endure a little bit more. Anyway, a long way of saying, I grew to trust myself and no longer be afraid that I would quit during a race. And my final year of college, I was lucky enough to not only make it into the top boat, the varsity boat, but also join a top boat that had 7 other incredibly talented rowers in it. And so together we won the Division I national championship for colleges in America, and actually had the opportunity to come over to your side of the pond. And we finished. We were one of the very few lightweight rowing teams that ever made it to the grand final of the Temple Challenge Cup at the Henley Royal Regatta. So being in England as a rower was a blast. And to get toward your question about the world records, after college, I was fascinated on a personal level with this confrontation of fear and how you overcome fear, basically the mental and physical challenge. And I'm terrified of heights. So when I couldn't row anymore, I ended up getting into mountain climbing, and for the better part of 15 years, worked on climbing the tallest mountain on every continent. In 2017, I was able to finish that goal on Mount Everest, not without some hiccups along the way. The year that I climbed Aconcagua in South America was, at least according to one research report, the deadliest year on Aconcagua in like a decade, or since they started studying death rates on the mountains. And in 2015, there was a horrible avalanche and earthquake at Mount Everest in base camp, where I was actually at base camp and luckily avoided being killed by a boulder and was able to help with the triage and treatment of many of the injured people at base camp during that episode. But to get to answering your question, after the 7 summits, I sort of scratched my head again and said, well, now what do I do to push my fears and physical limits? And a friend of mine suggested ocean rowing because I had been a rower in college and I had grown to love enduring bad weather over long expeditions in the mountains. And it was a perfect fit. So I met an Icelandic gentleman named Towne and a Scotsman named Jamie Douglas Hamilton, and together with them and 3 others in 2019, the 6 of us were the first people to ever row a boat with no sail or motor power from South America to Antarctica. And then the 5 world records were all related to that expedition. First people to row a boat to Antarctica, the furthest south anybody had ever rowed a boat. Those were a couple of the records. So it's, I'm still interested in finding ways to push mental and physical limits. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of mountain climbing here in the United States in the Rocky Mountains, but no major future expeditions in the works at the moment.
Well, and I mean, it's to sound patronizing, but it definitely doesn't come across. Definitely isn't from that position. But good on you for breaking those limiting beliefs. Terrified of. I mean, I can't say I've broken any world records, but I used to be absolutely terrified of heights, and I then decided that a good job for me would be doing abseiling and climbing. And I was stood on top of an abseil, 45 foot in the air. Went to unclip. I'd been up there all day. Went to unclip myself, and really knew I was over my fear of heights when I'd forgotten to clip myself in. I stood on nothing larger than a desk all day, throwing kids off, and surprised I didn't end up on the floor myself. But fantastic. Got out there and broke down some of those limiting beliefs and got over those fears. I think road to Antarctica. I don't know.
Just like you said, just like you said, we face this type of situation all the time. I mean, some people are terrified to speak in front of a crowd.
Yep.
And and their hands are sweating, but you find a way to do it. And if you lean into that fear, do some research on tips and tricks. Maybe there's a coach out there who can, maybe there's some visualization that you can do. For me, there's always, if I'm in a new organization and I'm meeting new people, like a happy hour type networking event, that's always a little bit scary for me. I can always feel myself starting to sweat. And at the end of the day, it's a very similar mental trigger of, you just got to do it. Like, take the first step. Turn to your right, shake somebody's hand, say, "Hi, my name's Andrew." And before you know it, the Band-Aid will be off and it'll be easier to sort of make it through the rest of the event. But everybody's got something. Could be a fear of eating some weird food. And you're like, just plug my nose and try the weird food. I don't know. But yeah, I kind of love playing cat and mouse with my own insecurities and fears and trying to push through them a little bit, because the exhilaration that I feel if I come home from an event where I was feeling nervous, is like, yeah, I did the thing. I was afraid of it and I pushed through. All right.
That's right. Well, the David Goggins equivalent of the private equity industry, we managed to find you and get you on the podcast, Andrew. So certainly thank you.
Someday, I wish. David Goggins is an inspiration to me and many, many other people. I what a kind of comparison, but I got a long way to go to be closer to him.
You're definitely a lot closer than most, I would say. So what are your influences? What do you watch? What do you read? What do you listen to? Do you recommend that others check out?
Yeah. A couple of older thinkers. I really like an American writer named Ralph Waldo Emerson, who did a lot of writing on the exploration of self and identity and how to live the right life for yourself. I was pretty young when I asked my dad who Marcus Aurelius was. He had the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius on his night table, and one day I just picked it up and started reading. And I was like, wow, this guy's got like a lot of nuggets of wisdom, like hot dogs. He's 2,000 years old. All right. For newer authors, there's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania named Richard Shell, who's done a lot of work in finding your calling and living a fulfilling life. I really like his work. And then finally, I think he's at Georgetown University. There's an academic named Cal Newport who writes in a similar vein. But the influences that I like the most are the ones that wrestle with the question of, what do we do with the hopefully 60 to 80 years that we have on this planet? How do we, because at the end of the day, I believe that the only person who can define happiness and success for ourselves is us. The only person that we can be accountable to is like, you got to be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm happy with how I spent my day. I'm happy with how I spent my year. Okay. Also, ask your spouse, ask your kids if you have a family, because you have responsibilities to them. But now, for the most part, there's no right answer, and we all have to decide for ourselves what's going to make us feel fulfilled, and hopefully choose more of that and choose less of the stuff that gives us a headache.
Well, let's hope so. But Marcus Aurelius sits on my nightstand as well, and been there. I've read it twice, and just back into it. I think the old adage of you can never read a book twice. Well, hopefully you can never read a book 3 or 5 times, as I'm continue to get through that one. So how does, if anybody wishes to reach out, Andrew, how best do they get in touch, please?
Oh, sure. Probably best to reach out via LinkedIn. My profile is public. Andrew Towne is the name. Messaging is open, so you're welcome to message me and we can start a conversation.
I think that's Towne with an E on the end. just for those hitting LinkedIn, and it's absolutely horrendous. If you can't get all the spelling right, you'll never find anybody coming from a guy who spends a fair bit of time on that platform. Well, thank you, Andrew, for coming on to the podcast, sharing us the wonderful insights of car wash, the wonderful insights of private equity, and of course, the wonderful insights of the pain and hell that you went through in order to achieve the world records that you did. So thank you very much for all of that.
A real pleasure, Alex. Thank you very much.
So, and everybody listening, thank you very much for yet again tuning in to the Private Equity Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. And the podcast comes out every single week. But till the next time, keep smashing it. And thank you very much for listening.